It's no secret that the MVRV Z-Score is one of Bitcoin's most reliable and accurate indicators. But with a few simple tweaks, we may actually be able to make it even more effective. Today, we're going to be looking at how we can improve one of Bitcoin's best indicators, and where better to start than the Bitcoin MVRV Z-Score chart we have here on BitcoinMagazinePro.com. Now, if you weren't already aware, the Bitcoin MVRV Z-Score is taking into account the realized cap or realized price of BTC. Now, this is the average accumulation price or cost basis of all BTC on the network. So however much US dollars was paid for each Bitcoin the last time it was moved from wallet to wallet, we can aggregate every single one of those transactions from each individual coin or fraction of a coin. And once we aggregate that, we can almost get this fair valuation for BTC to see how much the average investor has paid for their Bitcoin. So we can see right now that this realized cap is currently around $620 billion as the Bitcoin market cap sits above $1 trillion. So probably about 50%, 60, 70, I can't do the maths off the top of my head, percentage above the realized cap. So that's about the average percentage profit for all BTC investors. If we just scroll down on the chart here, we do actually get a little bit more information on how this is calculated, how you can interpret the chart. But visually, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Once we see the Bitcoin market cap beneath the realized cap, indicating that a majority of investors are actually at a loss on their position, we get these green buy areas. And once the average investor is on a massive multiple on their investment, so a 7, 10, 11 times on their investments, that's usually a good time to start selling BTC or taking partial profits on your positions, as that's usually not as sustainable. So once we actually enter this red area above here, probably worth considering taking some profit. But what we can actually do is tweak this metric a little bit, because like we said, this is the cost basis of all BTC on the network. What we can do now is actually isolate the realized price for just specifically longer term holders as well as shorter term holders. So if we just come to this chart here, we can see that this actually gives us on this moving average style realized price, but it's actually a lot lower. The average accumulation price for longer term holders, obviously, is actually significantly lower than new market participants. This is because they've typically bought Bitcoin months, years, a decade or so in the past. So obviously paid substantially less than the price is currently. If we just scroll down here, we can see that long-term holders are defined as anyone that's held their BTC for a significant period, which is 155 days or more. So we can scroll up now that this is actually significantly lower than the standard realized price. We can see that the average accumulation price for all BTC, rather than that 21,000, about $31,000. So the average accumulation for all BTC holders is about 10,000 more compared to just those longer term holders. So this is where we can also look at the short term holder realized price. Again, new market participants coming in has acted as a great level of support during bull cycles. Once new market participants are at break even on their positions, usually this is a good time to consider reaccumulating. And during bear cycles, this line actually acts as resistance. So this is maybe not a bad area to potentially considering scaling out of any position you maybe had left over from the previous bull cycle. And as we zoom in right now, Bitcoin's been pretty much hovering above and below this line as we've had a little bit of retracement in price action. So hopefully we can break back above and turn this $64,000 area into support sooner rather than later. But like we said, we can use these newly defined age periods, the long-term and short-term holders, to almost create a new MVRV specifically for different types of investors and traders. So here we're going to be using the Bitcoin Magazine Pro API. So if you're a site subscriber, you can actually gain access to all of the raw data from a vast majority of the metrics we have on site to manipulate and come up with your own unique metrics. The entire list is here. There's 89 different indicators currently, but we're always adding to this list. If I just go here, we can see that I've actually pulled the long-term holder realized price data here. And if I just scroll all the way down, there's a lot of data. We can see that down here, we have a new MVRV chart for long-term holders. And I've done the same thing for the short-term holders. If we just scroll down all the way here, we can see a very similar chart. But to make it look a little nicer, I've just collated these in a separate sheet and I can zoom in so we can see them all a bit clearer. And what this is indicating to us is clearly the very smooth cyclical cycles we see in the long-term holder MVRV give us very clean, accurate signals as when to take profit and potentially start scaling in very aggressively into our positions. In contrast to the short-term holder, where it's much more frequent fluctuations to the upside and the downside, much more wild swings. So this is actually really handy. So the MVRV on its own obviously is a great indicator, but the short-term MVRV maybe gives us a little bit of an indication into when to reaccumulate during bull cycles, or potentially maybe when to scale out during bear cycles a little bit easier, and then maybe just take more frequent trades, more intra-cycle positions. Whereas the long-term holder specific one maybe only gives us a signal every few years, once every 3-4 years potentially, but these signals are incredibly accurate and really indicate exactly when we should be scaling in aggressively or scaling out of our positions. So I have them each individually here. So if we just zoom in, we can see that, again, this gives us a really good insight into the investor behavior changes of Bitcoin over the years. If I just hide myself, what we can see very clearly are the diminishing returns we've been seeing in Bitcoin over the last few cycles. As the previous couple peaks have actually been lower, we're actually closing in our most recent all-time high on this decreasing trend line. So that's maybe an interesting area to watch. But excluding that, assuming we actually break higher in this current cycle to new all-time highs, we can see again that we have these very clear indication areas of when to take profit on positions, and as well when to maybe start scaling in very aggressively into our positions. Very similar to what we could actually see with just the standard long-term holder realized price chart. Once this is at a loss, so once the majority of long-term holders are losing money on their positions, these are incredible areas to scale in very aggressively into the Bitcoin market, because this actually isolates these areas a little bit better. If I just remove this, we can see that once we're beneath the realized price in this 2015 into 2016, 2017 cycle, this was at about $300, where if you were actually just focusing on the MVRVZ chart on its own, the proper chart we have on the site, this actually started going into the green area a few months earlier in September 2014 when price was around $400. So you actually get more condensed periods to really aggressively scale into positions. And as well, what we can see here is this very smooth uptrend towards this 2017 peak. Whereas if we just go back to the MVRV Z-Score chart here, during this period, we actually have these diminishing tops here, which actually may have looked a bit like bearish divergences in this score. Whereas if we go back here, we can see that this is just very smooth to the upside. So very clean indications on the long-term holder realized price for both profit taking and accumulation. And again, if we go to the short-term holder realized price, this gives us amazing indications on a much more frequent basis. So for example, on the standard MVRV Z-Score chart, as well as the long-term holder chart, we actually didn't get a sell signal at the previous cycle all-time high. We just looked at around this area here. On other charts, this has actually decreased so much, so if I go back here, that the MVRVZ chart on its own was significantly lower than the sell zone. Whereas if we just go to this short-term holder specific, we do actually reach this upper boundary on this short-term holder MVRV score, as well as sell signals as we were running up in this most recent cycle before a long retracement, as well as the most recent all-time high we've set above $74,000 before we've now retraced to, well, slightly beneath $50,000. And again, we get these much more frequent entry signals. If we look specifically to the previous bull cycle, for example, we got a buy signal down here before we re-went to a new all-time high. And again, just much more obvious buy signals before we rebound quite aggressively. Now, these, as we can see, aren't as smooth and as accurate and as reliable potentially as the long-term holder ones. But if you're someone that maybe wants to reaccumulate on dips and be a little bit more aggressive with your trading and investing, then this is definitely an amazing metric we can be watching. It's also interesting to note that these usually bottom out at about 0.66-ish. So once investors, new market participants have lost about a third of their capital on their investments, that's usually a great time to scale in. And the same is true for the upside. Once we reach about a 1.33, just above that towards a 1.4 region, this indicates another short-term peak we may see in the market. So it's both equal to the upside and the downside. Whereas we go back to the long-term holder realized price, really they're wanting to be at a 10, 20x, 30x potentially on their investments for profit taking, whereas they only really need to be break even for reaccumulation. So it's very different in terms of the investor behavior and sentiment when it comes to these two specific charts. But I think in unison, using the long-term holder to scale in very aggressively during Bitcoin bear cycles and towards the market peaks with these very clear and obvious cycle top signals, as well as looking at the short-term holder realized price, can give us a really clear indication of the most opportune moments to start buying and selling BTC. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. And make sure to check out all the resources we've discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on BitcoinMagazinePro.com, your number one source for Bitcoin analysis. So just to summarize, the MVRV Z-Score is one of the most effective metrics for identifying BTC market peaks and bottoms. However, this metric considers all Bitcoin holders, and separating the experienced from the new market participants can allow us to better react to investor sentiment and behavior. And creating a long-term holder MVRV allows us to see the best macro opportunities for both entering and exiting the market, as well as the short-term holders allows us to get more frequent intracycle positions on our BTC holdings. So I think in unison, these actually act as a great combination. And of course, the MVRV Z-Score on its own is still a great metric. But once we can actually adapt and fine tune and maybe use all three of them in combination, I think gives us a much better insight into where we may be during bull and bear cycles. If you liked this video, then please visit BitcoinMagazinePro.com, where our analytics help you to cut through the noise to make informed, data-driven decisions about Bitcoin. With over 150 live charts, personalized indicator alerts, in-depth crypto industry reports, API access, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And then we're going to know what your thoughts are on potentially using custom derived metrics like the ones we've discussed today. One quick thing to point out is the MVRV Z-Score is actually standardizing the raw MVRV data for standard deviation throughout Bitcoin's history. So we actually use data that's somewhat similar to this red raw MVRV data. So maybe this is something you can alter by yourself to maybe come up with even more creative and even more effective Bitcoin metrics using the BitcoinMagazinePro.com API. But if you do find anything or have any opinions on what we've discussed today, then let me know in the comments below and on social media. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.